When two of the biggest stars in country music find themselves seated for what's supposed to be a casual chat, you'd expect an entertaining, fun conversation, right? But what if things suddenly take a shocking turn, igniting an unforgettable clash that leaves everyone in the room reeling? This is the unbelievable story of how one innocent question spiraled into a heated confrontation that sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. You won't believe how a simple talk show moment turned into a full-on showdown, one that not only had the studio audience stunned but also made Miranda Lambert walk off the set. Stay with us as we take you behind the scenes of this explosive encounter. It was supposed to be a lighthearted episode of the Clarkson show. Kelly, the ever-charismatic host, beamed her trademark smile at the cameras. The crowd was buzzing with excitement because they were about to witness an epic conversation between two powerhouse artists, Miranda Lambert, country music's queen of authenticity, and Kelly Clarkson, the pop sensation who once ruled the country charts. Welcome back, everyone. Kelly's voice rang out, filled with the kind of warmth that made her a household name. I am absolutely thrilled to have the incredible Miranda Lambert here with us today. It's been far too long since we've had a chance to sit down together. Miranda, looking effortlessly cool in a black leather jacket and boots, leaned back in her chair, offering a half smile. She radiated that confident, no-nonsense attitude that her fans loved. But there was something about her smile, something guarded, that made it clear this wasn't going to be just another chat. "Well, Kelly, you know how it is," Miranda drawled in her thick Texas accent. "We've both been busy making waves in our own worlds, huh?" The crowd chuckled lightly, but something in her tone told Kelly there was more beneath the surface. Kelly's smile remained as bright as ever, but she didn't miss the edge in Miranda's voice. "It's time to dive in," Kelly thought as she smoothly shifted the conversation. "Absolutely. And speaking of making waves, your latest album has been making a splash, Miranda. But there's been a lot of buzz about some of your recent comments about country artists crossing over into pop. I've got to ask, do you think that trend is a good thing? Or should there be some boundaries in place?" Miranda's smile flickered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, you mean when I said that some artists forget where they come from the second they get a taste of mainstream success?" "Yeah, that's pretty much what I meant," she responded coolly. The air in the studio immediately grew heavy. Kelly's crew exchanged nervous glances, sensing that this conversation was about to veer in a direction no one expected. Kelly's usual warm demeanor flickered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her composure, knowing she had to stay professional. "Well, I think music is all about evolution and connecting with different audiences," Kelly said diplomatically, but the defensive tone was unmistakable. "And you've definitely explored a range of sounds throughout your career, right?" Miranda's eyes flashed with something sharper. "Explored? Sure. But there's a difference between growth and just abandoning everything that made you who you are, just to chase chart numbers," she said, her voice laced with criticism. "Some people seem to forget what real artistry is all about." The audience fell silent. What was supposed to be a friendly conversation now felt like the calm before a storm. Kelly was no stranger to tough interviews, but even she could sense that Miranda wasn't holding back today. "Well, Miranda," Kelly began, leaning forward just a bit, "it sounds like you have someone particular in mind with those comments. Are you talking about anyone specifically?" Miranda let out a short, tight laugh. "Do I? Maybe we should talk about authenticity. What does it mean to stay true to your sound versus chasing trends?" She shot back. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Kelly's voice was calm but firm. "Authenticity is subjective, Miranda. What feels true to one artist might feel limiting to another. I think growth and change are natural parts of any creative journey." "Natural? Maybe," Miranda replied with a cool, almost dismissive tone. "But when that change looks like an image makeover designed to appeal to the largest audience, that's not growth. That's manipulation." Kelly's composure was visibly tested, but she pressed on. This wasn't what she expected, but she knew she couldn't back down now. "I get what you're saying, Miranda. But isn't it also true that artists should have the freedom to grow in whatever direction feels right to them? There's room for both traditional and new in music, don't you think?" Miranda raised an eyebrow. "Freedom, huh? she said, almost sarcastically. "It's not about freedom, Kelly. It's about respect. Respect for where you came from and the people who made you who you are. You don't just throw that away when you start topping pop charts." The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing that Kelly was being pushed into a corner. But she wasn't about to let Miranda dictate the terms of the conversation. Kelly's usual warmth gave way to something far sharper now, something you couldn't ignore. Respect. Kelly's voice carried a bite now, the words clipped. "I don't need to be reminded of my roots, Miranda. I've always been open about my country background. But my artistry, it's not about being stuck in a box. I refuse to let anyone define what my journey should look like. Not you, not anyone." The tension in the studio grew thicker. Kelly and Miranda were no longer the friendly colleagues sitting across from each other. This had become a battle of ideologies. Miranda leaned forward, her expression hardening. "Oh, I'm not defining anything. I'm just calling out the fact that some artists, maybe even you, Kelly, like to rewrite their history when it gets inconvenient. When they don't want to be tied down to something that doesn't give them what they want anymore. But you can't just toss your authenticity aside like it's a pair of old boots you've outgrown." The air between them crackled with palpable hostility. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every small shift in body language. It was a silent standoff now. Everyone in the studio felt it. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was a battle for what it meant to be authentic in the world of music. Kelly's eyes narrowed, and she didn't break Miranda's gaze. "I've never tossed anything aside. You think this is just about convenience for me? You don't get to sit here and judge my career like you know the whole story." Miranda let out a short laugh, her voice low. "Oh, I know the story all right. You got your big break, you made it, and then, when it was time to make the next move, you ran away. You went to pop music where you didn't have to face the people who didn't think you were country enough. But don't sit there acting like you haven't left all that behind." Kelly's grip on the armrests tightened, her posture stiffening with each word. The audience was locked in a dead silence, their attention fully consumed by the fiery exchange. "You want to talk about authenticity? How about you remember that country music gave you a voice when nobody else would listen? And instead of sticking around to help it grow, you turned your back on it for something shinier," Miranda snapped. Kelly stood up suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "I never turned my back on country music. You don't get to tell me what I owe this genre or how I should evolve as an artist. I've paid my dues, I've worked hard, and if my journey took me to pop, then that's my choice. I'm not going to apologize for it." Miranda's eyes flashed with fire. "Apologies? This isn't about apologies. This is about recognizing that what you've done has consequences. You can't just ditch the genre that gave you everything and act like it's no big deal." Kelly's face flushed and her voice was low, dangerous. "I didn't ditch anyone. I found my voice, and I've always stayed true to my fans. But you, Miranda, you act like there's one path, one right way. That's the problem. There's no room for anyone who doesn't fit into your narrow idea of what authentic means." The audience was on edge now, some leaning forward in their seats, others exchanging whispers. The room was electric with the sound of their heated words, and it was clear that the gloves were completely off. Miranda stood too, crossing her arms defiantly. "I'm not saying there's only one way, but there's a thing called loyalty. And some of us actually fight for the genre that gave us our start. We don't jump ship when things get tough. We stick around and fight for it." Kelly stepped closer to Miranda now, her eyes burning with intensity. "I'm not asking you to fight for my choices, Miranda. I'm asking you to respect them. But it seems you're too busy being angry that I don't fit your version of what a country artist should be." Miranda scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Respect? You want respect from me? That's rich, Kelly. You want me to respect the artist who couldn't wait to shed her country skin the second pop came calling?" The temperature in the room had reached its boiling point. The staff in the control room looked like they were on the edge of their seats, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the drama continue. But there was no turning back now. The interview had gone too far. Kelly's voice cut through the tension, each word filled with unshakable resolve. "You don't get to define my career, Miranda. and you sure as hell don't get to decide what respect looks like in my world." Miranda stood firm, her gaze unwavering. "Then maybe you should have thought about that when you walked away from the genre that helped you get here." Kelly's hands clenched, but she didn't break her stare. "I didn't walk away. I outgrew the walls you're trying to put around me." The room was a pressure cooker. The two superstars locked in a fierce exchange that seemed to have no end in sight. The silence in the studio grew deafening. The cameras lingered on Kelly and Miranda, capturing every intense shift in their expressions. The usual energy of the Kelly Clarkson show, the playful banter, the laughs, the heartwarming moments, had completely vanished. Instead, it was replaced by a charged atmosphere of animosity, one that no one in the room had anticipated. Kelly's voice dropped lower, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "You think I just walked away, Miranda? You really think it's that simple?" Miranda's eyes never wavered, her stance resolute. "You didn't just walk away. You turned your back on the very genre that made you who you are. Kelly, you cashed in on the country music scene. Got the fame, the fans, the success, and then, the minute it became inconvenient, you ran to pop music like it was a better deal." The words cut deep, and Kelly's expression faltered for a split second. But in the blink of an eye she regained her composure, standing taller now, facing Miranda head-on. "You don't know the first thing about my journey, Miranda," Kelly said through clenched teeth. "I didn't run anywhere. I didn't abandon anyone. I followed my own path, and yes, it led me to new opportunities. But my success, my music, none of it came at the expense of the fans who've supported me from the very beginning." Miranda took a step forward, closing the gap between them. "Opportunities? You mean the ones that got you away from a genre that wouldn't let you breathe unless you fit their perfect little box? Country music didn't have room for anyone who didn't play by its rules. And you, Kelly, are the perfect example of someone who got tired of fighting for that room." The energy in the room surged. It felt like the entire studio was leaning in, holding their collective breath as Miranda's words hit hard. The audience could feel the heat between the two women. Kelly's face reddened, the heat of the moment boiling over. "You want to talk about rules? Country music is no different than any other genre. It evolves. And if you can't evolve with it, you're stuck. I didn't leave because it wasn't good enough for me, Miranda. I left because I refused to let myself be confined by your version of authenticity." Kelly's voice was calm but unyielding. Each word measured, but they struck with the force of a sledgehammer. Miranda's eyes narrowed, her lips tightening into a thin line. "Authenticity isn't a version, Kelly. It's a way of life. It's knowing where you came from and having the courage to stick with it, no matter how hard it gets. You talk about growth, but some of us aren't willing to sell out our roots for a few extra streams or radio spins." Kelly clenched her fists, her voice rising with emotion. "I'm not selling out, Miranda. You don't get to sit here and accuse me of that. You think I'm some kind of pop sellout, but you don't know what I've been through to get here. You've got this narrative in your head that doesn't fit my reality." The audience was in complete shock now. This was no longer an interview. It was a full-blown personal challenge. The words being exchanged were no longer about music. They were about identity, about respect, about the very essence of what it meant to be an artist. Miranda crossed her arms over her chest, her voice dripping with contempt. "You can try to dress it up however you want, Kelly. But deep down, you're just mad that you couldn't make it as just a country artist. You didn't fit the mold, and now you're here, trying to make everyone think you were always meant for something bigger. That's the problem. You left behind the people who believed in you, and for what? So you could be more famous?" Kelly took a deep breath, her expression hardening as she met Miranda's stare. "Fame? You think that's what this is about?" "No, Miranda. This is about being true to myself. I'm not trying to make anyone think anything. I'm just living my truth. And if that doesn't fit with your idea of who I should be, that's not my problem." The room seemed to shrink as their words echoed in the silence. The air was thick with the weight of what had just been said. Miranda was unrelenting. "Maybe it's not your problem, Kelly, but it sure is mine. I've watched artists like you come in and out of country music, use it as a stepping stone, and then forget where they came from. And you know what? It hurts. It hurts the community. and it hurts the artists who are actually still fighting to make sure the genre stays pure." Kelly's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening with every word that came from Miranda. She had taken all she could take. It was clear now that the gloves were completely off. "You think you have the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't?" Kelly's voice was low, steady, but filled with a quiet fury that was undeniable. "Miranda, this isn't your fight. You don't get to be the gatekeeper for who's country enough or not. I've paid my dues. I've earned my place in this industry, and I'll be damned if I let you, or anyone else, tell me what I can and can't do with my career." The entire studio was at a standstill. It was like the room itself had frozen, waiting for the next move. The tension was so thick that you could feel it in your bones. Miranda's lips curled into a smile that wasn't quite a smile at all. "Earned your place?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You earned your place by leaving behind the people who made you, Kelly. You're right. You've earned something. But it's not what you think." Kelly took one step forward, her eyes never leaving Miranda's. "You know what, Miranda? I'm done here. I came on this show to talk about music and to have a meaningful conversation. But instead, you've turned this into a personal attack. I don't have time for this. Not today." Miranda didn't flinch. "Oh, so now you're going to shut me down? Is that how this works now, Kelly?" Kelly's face was flushed with anger, her voice low and controlled. "No, Miranda. This is how it works when someone comes onto my show and tries to publicly shame me for the choices I've made. I'm done pretending this is a respectful conversation. I'm done pretending like you care about my truth." The silence in the room was deafening. The camera crew shifted uneasily, unsure of how to proceed. Miranda stood tall, her voice biting. "I came on your show because I thought you might still be the artist I once respected. But clearly, I was wrong. Maybe it's time you look at yourself in the mirror and ask if you're really being honest with yourself." Kelly's eyes blazed as she turned to the production team. "Cut the cameras. We're done." Kelly's voice echoed with finality, and with that, Miranda Lambert turned and walked out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Kelly stood motionless for a moment, her hands trembling slightly as the weight of what had just transpired began to settle in. The tension in the room was palpable, and it seemed as though no one knew how to move forward. After a few moments, Kelly turned to her crew, still visibly shaken. "Let's go to commercial," she said, her voice calm but laced with an undeniable edge. The cameras cut away to a commercial break, but the silence in the studio was deafening. The crew was scrambling, unsure of what to do next, but everyone knew one thing: what had just happened would go down in TV history. Kelly Clarkson, the beloved talk show host, had just experienced one of the most explosive interviews of her career, and Miranda Lambert, the country music queen, had walked off the set with a final, scathing remark. Backstage, the crew members exchanged hurried whispers, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The tension was so thick you could feel it in the air, but no one dared to speak about it openly. It was as if the unspoken agreement in the room was, "Let's just get through this." Kelly, however, was not done. She paced back and forth in her dressing room, her mind racing. What just happened? How did it escalate so quickly? Why didn't I see this coming? She could feel the heat of the moment still coursing through her veins. Her emotions were a whirlwind of anger, hurt, confusion, and, if she was being honest with herself, a touch of disbelief. Miranda's words had cut deeper than she expected. But what stung the most was the way the interview had turned into something personal, something that felt like an attack on her integrity, on her artistry. After a few minutes, Kelly took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She looked at herself in the mirror, meeting her own eyes. "I won't let this define me," she thought, her reflection staring back at her with a mixture of resolve and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Miranda had already left the studio. The sound of her boots hitting the pavement outside was the only noise in the otherwise quiet parking lot. She was still seething, her anger simmering beneath the surface. As she slid into the back seat of her car, she finally let out a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. But even as the tension started to ease, Miranda's thoughts were still consumed by the confrontation. She wasn't someone who backed down easily. She had always fought for what she believed in. especially when it came to country music and what it meant to stay true to its roots. But as she sat there in the back seat, she couldn't help but wonder if this confrontation had gone too far. Did I push too hard? Did I cross a line? But before she could dwell on it too long, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a message from her manager. "We need to talk about today. The fallout's going to be huge. Let's have a meeting later to discuss next steps." Miranda's eyes narrowed as she typed out a quick response. "I'm fine." She needed to hear the truth. Back in the studio, Kelly was doing her best to keep a professional face on as the commercial break ended. She smiled warmly at the camera, though it was clear that the hurt was still simmering beneath the surface. "All right, folks, we're back," she said, her voice carrying the weight of what had just transpired. That was definitely a moment. "We're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned because I'm sure we've got some interesting thoughts coming your way after this." The audience, sensing the tension in the air, clapped politely, but it was obvious that they too were processing the fallout of what they'd just witnessed. In the control room, the producers were still scrambling to figure out how to handle the aftermath. The show had never experienced anything like this before. The social media world, however, was already buzzing. Within minutes, clips of the heated exchange were flooding Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Fans from both sides of the argument were voicing their opinions, and the hashtag #Kelly vs. Miranda was trending worldwide. Some fans sided with Kelly, calling her brave for standing up for her artistic freedom. Kelly is a true artist. She made the choice that was best for her career, and Miranda has no right to judge her path, one tweet read. Another fan echoed that sentiment. Kelly never abandoned country music. She's just expanding her sound. Leave her alone, Miranda. But there were plenty who sided with Miranda, praising her for calling out Kelly's hypocrisy. Miranda is right. You can't just leave the country community and pretend it didn't shape you. Respect the genre that gave you everything, one fan commented. Another added, Miranda's spot on. Kelly acted like country music was a stepping stone. She needs to own that. Back at the studio, Kelly's phone began to buzz with texts and calls. She knew it was only a matter of time before the media would ask her about the confrontation, but she wasn't ready to address it just yet. Not before she'd had a moment to really process what had happened. Her PR team had already messaged her, advising her to take the high road and release a statement saying that the conversation was taken out of context and that they'd both simply had a difference of opinion. But Kelly wasn't ready to give a cookie-cutter response. This was personal. She stared at her phone for a moment, then put it down. "I'm not going to let anyone else define my story," she thought. "I'll speak for myself, on my own terms." Miranda, too, had begun to process the fallout. She knew that, in a few hours, the headlines would start rolling in. The country queen versus the pop star. She felt a wave of pride. She'd said what she needed to say, and maybe, just maybe, it would finally get people to start thinking about authenticity in the music industry. But that pride was tempered with a tinge of regret. Had she pushed Kelly too hard? Her phone buzzed again, another text from her manager. "Let's talk about how you want to handle things tomorrow. There's a lot of heat on you right now." Miranda hesitated before typing a quick reply. "I'm not backing down." She needed to hear it. What had started as a simple talk show interview had spiraled into a moment of seismic importance in the music world. Fans and critics alike were weighing in, and the battle for authenticity in country music had never been so intense. Was Kelly Clarkson simply following her artistic journey, or had she abandoned her roots for something more commercially successful? Was Miranda Lambert right to call her out, or had she overstepped? The answers weren't as simple as they seemed. As the media storm continued to swell, both Kelly and Miranda were left to reflect on the explosive confrontation. The world was watching, and there was no going back. Days passed, and the media frenzy didn't die down. Interviews were conducted, opinions continued to flood social media, and fans from both sides dug in their heels. The tension between Kelly and Miranda remained unresolved. But perhaps, in some strange way, that was the point. Music, especially country music, was about authenticity. But authenticity was something deeply personal. Both women were fiercely loyal to their own artistic journeys. Kelly had fought for her place in the pop world, while Miranda had stayed true to her roots, fighting for the integrity of country music. In the end, the truth was that there was no one way to be authentic, no one blueprint for success. Both Kelly and Miranda had fought for their music, for their stories, and for their right to evolve as artists. The conversation between them wasn't over. It had only just begun,